Do you want to get into discharge printing but just don't know enough and aren't sure the different kinds there are? Check out this video to learn more. Hey folks, Matt from Printavo here today at Sound & Fury to talk about discharge printing. Now, discharge printing is a very broad term and has lots of different types of printing within it. So we're going to talk today about clear discharge printing, which is really ideal for a natural cotton color and for plastisol or water-based prints to be applied on top. We're also going to go over a standalone top white or bright white discharge print, as well as color discharge, where we're going to leave behind whatever color we want for a great, vibrant, single color discharge. So first thing you want to do is identify which of the discharge products you want to use. So ideally you want to figure out, am I doing a plastisol print or even an acrylic print that's going to have multiple colors and layers, and I want to make sure to have it a little bit reduced and a softer hand? Well, in that instance, it may be a good idea to use a discharge underbase. Now, keep in mind, discharge really only works well on organic fibers. So you're going to want to stay away from the inorganics. Although they will work a bit, they're a little more unpredictable. So to get started, stick with your cotton, bamboo, jute, anything basic and organic that will discharge. Another good use for a discharge would be a standalone discharge white. So this shirt, for example, this one happened to be done in plastisol, but we could also do it in discharge. That would mean we would have almost no hand feel, and I could still optically make it white. Really good for a single color, not meant to be put as an underbase, so not great for other inks to stack on top. Oftentimes trying that will have washability issues. Another great case use is color discharge. Similar to the white discharge, we can actually choose a color in which we want the discharge to be. Today we're going to be doing a red discharge, however you can get it in any color. Now be careful, it's very hard to have a perfect Pantone match when dealing with discharging out of the color. It'll usually be close, but make sure it's not a specific Pantone call out. If it is, you may want to stick to an acrylic ink or a plastisol. Now, just like any other printing process, there are some key variables that are really important to look at and control. When dealing with discharge, usually dealing with a very thin water-based ink. When dealing with that, you want to make sure you're using a higher mesh count. Too low of a mesh count will have the ink drip through and make a mess, be a bit chaotic for you on press. I recommend starting off with a 190 or higher for your discharge printing. Now, when coating the screens, again, you want to make sure not to have too thick of a stencil. Too thick of a stencil will have the ink actually cling to the edges and cause drying. So a little bit thinner than normal, but not too thin at the same time. Another big variable that you'll oftentimes hear people talk about is thin thread mesh. If going into water-based, especially discharge, I would recommend getting a thinner thread mesh. Now what that means is if the thread itself is actually thinner, the open area is larger. This will help keep the image area wet or moist and prevent drying up in the screen while you're printing. When choosing a squeegee, very imperative to make sure you have a sharp edge on your squeegee blade. Now, Squegee Durometer is also important. I do recommend a firmer, so like a 70 or firmer than that. I oftentimes use a triple durometer, 65, 90, 65. But again, how sharp that edge is really imperative because you're going to be able to shear off that ink and prevent it from drying up, which oftentimes is the issue trying water-based. The ink will want to dry. When on press, it's also very handy to have a spray bottle with water. Now consult with your ink manufacturer. They may have additives you can add into your ink to prevent it from closing up. They may also have additives to add into that water bottle to spray on the screens to also keep them open. During your run, have that spray bottle handy. So every now and then you can give it a spritz of water, just mist it over the area to help keep it moist. It's also very important to make sure that your dryer and your exhausting in the area you're printing are well ventilated. Discharging will have a runoff of fumes that do not smell great and are not great for you. Make sure you're properly ventilated and discharging through your dryer. So now that we've hammered down some of the variables to keep an eye on, let's head to press and start printing. Alright, so before we can get to press with our dischargings, I have to get them ready. So again, we're going to be using 3 different types of discharging today. One's going to be a clear discharge, great for a natural, subtle cotton color, or a bright white discharge, good for a standalone top but still soft white, and we'll be doing a color discharge. In this instance, we're using a red. To get these inks ready, for each of them I have to use 3 different additives. Matsui has many additives. They recommend 3 additives at 3% by volume, which combined they call the hat trick. I've already got that mixed up, so I'm going to add 9% of that into each of the inks, and I'm also going to use their Discharge activator powder at 6% by volume to get them ready. When I mix the additives, the ink is fine. However, once I add the Discharge activator, it does start what we call a pot life. It's only going to be good for about 8 to 10 hours before the ink wants to harden up, because the activator will continue to work through that ink. So I've gone ahead and inked my screen with the first Discharge ink that we're going to be working with. This one is a clear Discharge. So this is going to be a very natural cotton that's going to be left over. Essentially what's happening is it's bleaching out, for lack of a better term, it's bleaching out the actual color of the garment and only exposing the natural cotton fibers. Again, this is great for a very soft, kind of vintagey Discharge clean print, or really ideal to be stacked underneath plastisol, Discharge underbase. You can do acrylics on top as well. Keep it very soft and light and let the color sit on top of it nicely. So let's go ahead and print this, just this one clear Discharge on this black test fabric and see how it looks. So I'm again going to make sure I'm using, in this instance, a triple durometer squeegee. The really important thing here is that the edge of the squeegee is nice and sharp to make sure it shears nice. So I'm going to go ahead and pass that. I'll pass it twice. And then when I flood it, I want to do a little bit of a heavier flood than with plastisol, because I really want to trap the moisture in that area to keep it from drying up. Okay? So now it's a little bit different than plastisol or even acrylic inks. I can't really see the print that well. Even after I flash it, I won't really notice it. For this, you're really going to see it after it goes to the dryer. If I was doing a plastisol top color, I would flash this and then print the plastisol. Again, it wouldn't look very vibrant until it discharges to the dryer. Let's go ahead and put this to the dryer and see how it looks. Now, because I'm on a smaller electric dryer, it's very likely it will not be fully discharged in just one run through the tunnel. I'll run this through a second time just to make sure. Ideally, you'll be working with a gas dryer, which will be really efficient to help discharge out. All right, so I've gone ahead and cleaned out the clear Discharge, and now I've put in a Matsui bright white Discharge. On this one and the last one, since they were bright bases, I was using a 180 thin thread mesh just to make sure that it clears the screen correctly. So let's go ahead and test out this bright white Discharge so we can compare the differences between the bright white and the clear Discharge. Okay? So same thing, I'm going to make sure the squeegee has a nice sharp angle on it. Run that through. I'll do it a second time. Now, if I start to notice anything drying up, that's when it's very handy to have a spray bottle of water nearby, and you can kind of give it a slight mist. I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice flood, make sure it stays filled, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab a bottle of water and just give it a bit of a mist over it to keep it wet. Now this time, I can actually see a bit of it because bright white actually has some acrylic to it as well. So it does basically bleach out or discharge the color of the garment, but it leaves behind a thin layer of an acrylic white ink on top. That's why it works great as a standalone. You still won't feel any ink, but not really ideal for an underbase because it has that acrylic. Let's go ahead and put this in the dryer and see how it looks. Alright, for the third and final, I'm going to be using a color Discharge. Now this one, all I had in stock was a high mesh base, so it's actually meant to go through a higher mesh count to hold detail. I have this on a 255, that or a 305 would be ideal. If I ran this on a lower mesh count, it would just drip through. It's a lot more runny and more water-based than you'd expect it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and we'll see how it looks on the other side of the dryer. Check it out. Alright, so I went ahead and did the Discharge prints with the 3 different ink types. Here we have the clear Discharge. Again, we can actually see it's more of a natural tan white, not as white as the Discharge white. Again, this is great for a standalone, very soft, vintagey look, but really ideal for a Discharge underbase. Here we have the bright Discharge white, which we can see it is actually very optically bright and white. Not great for an underbase because of the acrylic yield that's inside of that, but looks really good as a standalone and has a nice vintagey feel. Again, with all these, because of Discharge, after it's washed, you won't feel any ink. On this one right here, this is the color Discharge. We chose to be red, And again, very vibrant, looks great as a standalone, wonderful print, and again, no hand whatsoever. So now that we've seen the different types of discharge printing, done them on different applications, we can now better choose which discharge process is best for each project. Hopefully this video was helpful. Please be sure to leave any tips and tricks you have on discharge printing in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more videos. Thanks.